Hello, we are in Westerville, Ohio. We're going to do a setup. We're right outside Columbus, Ohio. This is for a big brand that we've done a good bit of work for before. And we're going to set up a wheel, customize it some, and have it operational. Today we have an inspection. I think our inspection is around 2 or 3 o'clock, where the Ohio State Department of Agriculture will come out and inspect everything on the ride. To be prepared for this inspection, we went and got the whole ride x-rayed. So we had a technician come out, and he literally went over every single piece of metal on the ride and did ultrasonic testing, magnetic particle testing. In there, we're looking for the wall thickness of any of the tubing. We're also looking for any cracks or stress cracks from any flexing. A lot of road transportation could do that. So the ride came out great. There was no discrepancies in what the wall thickness is supposed to be on the tubing. So it looks great. So our next obstacle is going to be getting around this corner here. We're parked at a hotel, and this hotel is in, I would say, more of a residential area, so it doesn't have the space that we're used to. So we're going to have to slither around this corner with this truck, head out, and we're going to go to the setup site. Now I gotta pull the truck ahead, so stay here. So with this power source, the last time we set up, we learned about this Ferris wheel. In every once in a while, we would go somewhere and we would have strange electrical problems. So we would have one leg on the Ferris wheel spiking up to like 178 volts and then back down to like 80. And it was a wave on the meter. It was going 178 to 80. And it didn't make sense. So at the last event, I checked my neutral and ground. I put a meter on them on the other side, and I was having like 160 or 180. It would fluctuate, and then it would go down to like 60. So we're getting all these strange voltages all over the place. There shouldn't be voltage like that. The European rides, they have a transformer that boosts them up 380 volts inside there. So they're having to adapt into our voltage. They also don't use a neutral. They don't use any neutral in Europe. They are just strictly the 3 hots, which are these, to ground. And you get your voltages there. Didn't understand why every once in a while we would go and we would have all these weird things happening. So like the lights in our control booth would flicker on and off, and they were cycling. And at the same time, we were going and having that strange voltage sway on the meters. So I figured one thing out. The generators that we use normally, they will have a metal strip connecting these 2 bolts. So this is your neutral and this is your ground. Well, code-wise, these 2 are supposed to be bonded at the source. So typically what we'll see is a strip of steel bus bar that connects these 2. The generator we were using at the last event did not have that. It didn't have that. So what I did, and we were having a lot of issues, I just connected these with a jumper wire. And it made all the difference in the world. So all of the drives and controls in that wheel were getting false parameters. They're having a lot of trouble. So when I jumped those 2 together, our stray voltage went away and we didn't have this problem. So what we're doing is we're compensating for a European designed ride on the US electrical system, and it seemed like that fixed it. So not having the neutral and the ground bonded were causing all kinds of problems. So now we're going to be extremely careful. When we have this Ferris wheel connecting to a power source, we're going to make sure that those 2 are connected. So I'm going to try to do that here. So these are our adapters. This is a 400 amp standard cam. I'm glad the generator has them on. And we're going to screw these adapters on. Amusement rides usually use a 100 amp mini cam. And I don't know that there's any other industry that uses the 100 amp, 150 amp mini cams. I think it's just amusement rides. So we always have to adapt up. Our bumper cars use these big 400 amp cams because it draws a lot more power. But this Ferris wheel, again, super energy efficient. It uses, I would say, almost nothing. Almost no power whatsoever used on this European Ferris wheel. These need to be tight because even if you're just drawing a small amount of current, you're still prone to hot connections if they're loose, or an intermittent voltage problem like we had before. We don't want any of that. We want good, clean power connections. That's one of the reasons that using these adapters, even though they're very expensive to buy these things, they're crazy expensive, but I would rather have this than wires twisted together or connections that aren't covered, any of that stuff. I am not into that stuff. So I like clean connections. It's a lot safer this way. Okay. So that's our connection. We're going to get a double ground. We're having an electrician come in to do this. We could do it, but an electrician's coming to do it. So he is going to drive us 2 ground rods in here. They're going to be 6 feet apart because that's what the amusement people want to see. And then we'll ground the generator. Will be grounded. Now, another thing about grounding that a lot of people kind of don't look at. A lot of these smaller generators are self-grounded. I don't know what that means. I don't know how something can be self-grounded. But I do know that there is an electrical code, and I'm no electrician by any means, that this generator does not require a ground to be protected. We ground them anyway, and the amusement code requires them to be grounded, but the electrical code says that a generator like this is self-grounded, so it already has some sort of a grounding circuit in it. I don't know what that means, but a lot of people tell me that. there you go, Corey. All right. More? Yep, that's it right there. Okay.
Screwdrivers. There's your oil that you like, our rivets, everything that we need all the time is accessible, and the extras are inside.
Perfect. I know I say this on just about every video we do, but right now is the very critical time when half of the wheel is up and the drive tires back there that are holding it, that's the only thing holding this wheel from sliding down through, causing disaster for everybody that's standing on the deck. So it's a very time to be very careful, because if something went wrong, if the wheels didn't grab properly, all of the weight up there would come down and it would be a mess. It would not just be a hazard to the people on the ground, it would be a hazard to the electrical wiring on the side of the wheel, slamming things together, possibly cracking things, bending the ride in a way it's not meant to be. So we're very cautious at this time. Everyone tries to move a little more careful than normal because if something went wrong. And again, it's all on those drive tires. So wheels starting to come back around now, and once we get the weight onto the other side, it gets a little more balanced. So at this point, it's better. We also have that strap up there as a safety, just in case something goes wrong. That little green strap up there would give us a little bit of protection. And to reach these, you need to be tall. So usually the tall person will stand over here, put these pins in. That's what Mike does. And we got ladders on the other side. We usually keep this set of rims up higher, and it works out. So that way you don't need 4 ladders. So it's kind of a balancing act. You got to get these things up into place, get them pinned and aligned, and then you go to this side and he has to not only align that but push the pin in and hold the rim at the same time. So it's a bit of a niche to get all those done. Everything we do, you got to be extra careful that you don't hit one of these LED lights with the hammer or damage the LED lighting when you're pulling the rims out of the rack. So there's a lot that carelessness can actually cause more damage to the ride than good. So everyone that works on the ride, we're extremely careful on what we do to not cause damage, chip paint, break lights, pull on wires. There's so many things that can go wrong, and we're very aware of that. We drove through rain, so a lot of the gondola sticks that hold the gondolas on, they're upside down in transport, so they get water in them. And when you stand the wheel up, as you're advancing the wheel, those sticks turn the other way. So all of the water that's in the stick dumps out, and it gives the people down here that are trying to work a nice shower of rusty water. And again, rust is our enemy. That's why we had the gondola wheel x-rayed. We do some non-destructive testing, ultrasonic, where they shoot high frequency waves into the steel, and they can actually measure the tubing thickness. And when that tubing degrades, that's when the ride becomes dangerous, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're holding the gondola up with one stick of tubing, and that tubing loses its integrity because of rust or corrosion. So the only way that you can really determine how degraded that tubing is through an NDT, non-destructive testing. And that's what we just had done. Also, we're setting the ride up now in Ohio. And if you remember, a few years back, there was a tragic accident where there was tubing on a pendulum type ride. The tubing was full of water for years, and it was just degrading away and rotting the tubing. And one day, very tragically, that ride had an accident, and the tubing broke off, and the seat holding people fell to the ground, and it didn't have a good ending. So since then, Ohio has become very, very strict on all of their regulations here. Any little chip, any rust, any corrosion on the ride needs to be addressed. So before we come here, we get the ride NDT tested, make sure that there's no problems. This is one of the areas here that they want tested for the annual testing of the ride. This is actually a visual point here. So you look around, and when you do testing of visual NDT, you're looking for signs of like flexing. You're looking for the welded areas to not have any stretches where the paint is cracking away. And you know, we keep this ride inside, so it looks good. But a ride that's stored outside, there may be other issues. A ride that is set up improperly, which means people don't always know what they're doing when they set these things up, and they don't know about the specifics to the ride. Some rides just require you to treat them a certain way when you set them up, or stand them up, or use caution at certain times. And these are the areas that are important, as well as all of that white framework up there. All of that tubing has been tested, and everything came out great. We have the inspection results, and when the Ohio inspectors get here, I think that may make their job easier, knowing that they're here to make the ride safe and to ensure everything is right and up to par. And when they see these test results, it helps them know what's inside that tubing, because the average person doesn't have the ability to see inside tubing and know where the rust is. So this covers that, and that's one of the reasons why we do it. So the wheels coming around, after this, there'll be one more segment that goes in and makes it round. The last segment kind of depends. How easy it goes in is going to depend on the weather. I think it's probably about 70 degrees today, and got a little bit of cloud in the sky. If it's hot, it will expand those last two rims down there to where they're a little bit bigger, and make it a little more difficult to get in. If it's a really cold day, those rims are going to be smaller, and they're not going to want to go in as easy. Sometimes we have to use a ratchet strap to close that gap up and make these pins line up.
I'll do my side first.
So it looks like the cold day has caused the metal to shrink up a little bit. So that last rim iron has shrunk. So Corey has got a strap on it. He's ratcheted it in, and now he's trying to get that final pin in place.
I can only get it like on a loose. It's past.
You got it, Mike. Get down quick. Lift down a little. I actually pulled down.
Ratchet loose and then your pin.
So now we're up at the top here doing axle pins. I basically get the biggest handful of pins that I can get, and I start in one spot and I start pinning the axle around. So I'm going to start right in here. Pin goes in. Now I got retainer clips. The best thing about being up here, even though it's high up, there's a lot to hold on to. It might look like it's difficult, but it's actually pretty easy here. Now this pin doesn't go in, so as usual, we're going to roll the wheel around, and you know, the pins change, the weight on the ride changes, and the pins get easier to put in. You in a good spot?
Yeah.
Roll it some. So now we've got our fence on, got all those pins in up top, and it's coming together. So after this, we've got to get the bonnets, which are the little rain caps above the gondola. There's a stack of them right back here, and we're going to get those bonnets out. And there's little sticks that are going to rotate down that hold the gondolas. We rotate the stick down, pin the bonnet on, and when all the bonnets are done, we're going to start putting seats on. All the bonnets are numbered to the specific sweep that they go on. The number for the sweep is up there, and when it gets rotated down, everything will be right side up. So there's a system, there's a little keeper up there. It's just a piece of tubing that holds the ride, you know, holds those sticks in position for transport so they can have a place to stow. So that little link actually just goes on the ground. We don't use it during operation, and it's just that. So instead of throwing it down and denting the diamond plate and doing all kinds of damage to the ride, we simply leave the pin in it and rotate it down, and then Mike takes it off at the bottom. It saves a lot of work on our part and keeps the ride in good condition. One of the downsides to this ride is this cloth that has to go in between the bonnets, that has to be wound up and is very, very aged because we've had so many assembly cycles that you have to put that inside these bonnets every time Otherwise it would rub the paint off when you stack them inside one another. That's one of our least favorite parts about setting this ride up. Another thing about setting these gondola wheels up is your alignment to your wheels. The tires here, you could see our alignment is very close. So even though you level the ride's perfectly level and it's happy and everything says that it's supposed to be right, you end up with just a little bit of overhang on the wheels. Now, I've seen gondola wheels where the rim was nearly scraping against the edge of the ride and almost running on the sidewall of the tire, which there's no reason to do that. If you're running the ride, these should be a lot closer than what I've seen. We normally try to keep them dead on. So there's a simple solution for this, to correct this problem and to get these wheels running true. So what I'm going to do, we need to get the tower shoved over. So the only way to shove the tower over is going to be this jack here. It needs to be lengthened. So I have my hydraulics back here, and this is cylinder number 4. I'm going to raise it up, and you can actually see good. So to preserve that setting and what we just did by aligning it, we're just going to shim up on this jack a little bit to hold the setting in place. That way we don't lose it. But this will definitely, now I'm going to lower the ride back down, and we're going to see how much of that setting we saved when we spin the ride. We're tracking much better. So really, there's no, it's not a big deal. It's not that difficult. There's times when the ride may settle, maybe you're on soft ground and it gets a little bit out. There's times when the wind will be blowing on the ride and kind of moving it over a little bit and it knocks you out a little bit. But there's no reason not to have those wheels tracking perfectly. And if they don't track perfectly, there may be something wrong with maybe the motors. These motors here, they have adjustments on every axis. So if you need to bring the motor in closer, up, down, tighten them, anything you need to do, you can adjust the motors. But we know the motors are adjusted, and we know it's possible to have the wheels track dead on the rim, perfectly straight, and that's what we shoot for on every job. So we're using our new nylon locking nuts. They have these nylon inserts inside of them, keeps them from coming off, and they get worn from time to time. So we ordered new ones and they're here, so we're going to change them all out. That way we don't have any trouble. Again, it might have been $25 for all of these nuts that will hold the gondolas on. To me, it's a great investment. And again, it is a part that wears. We get a good bit of life out of these things before they also new bolts, because the bolts, they get rounded. And another thing that we do, we keep these nuts facing us. And the reason we do that is so we can inspect them during operation. So you can see that the nuts are tight. You can see that the tips of the nuts of the bolt is through the nut and there's no slippage. Also, there's two here. In case there's a complete failure of one, you've got another one. So you got two locking points that hold these gondolas down. Very safe. That's one of the reasons that we make these changes. Is it's very inexpensive insurance, and it's nice to have fresh new hardware on a gondola at a part that you're removing and reinstalling as often as we do. So it's 1:17 and we have an inspection coming, should be about 3 o'clock. So we only have maybe about 20 more minutes to go to get the rest of these gondolas on, but I love being on time for our inspections. I know there's a lot of planning that goes on to get an inspection, to get the inspector out here. He has other places to go. We have places that could be hundreds of miles away that we're coming from, so it does involve everything to work out. We have to be on schedule. We always try to factor in a lot of wiggle room time. So if something goes wrong, if we're held up for weather, if there's people in our setup area that we can't get in on time. So we try to factor all those things in and leave ourselves a buffer for prior to our inspection. And we did have some delays for the weather getting here a little bit, but we're still here ample time to, we came from Indianapolis, and we had to just go over to Columbus, Ohio, where we are now. And not a bad ride. We had the ride at the hotel. When we left in the morning, we came straight over to the job. No delays getting in. We had to move a generator. That was about it. So the whole ride is set up, and again, ample time for inspection. One of the things that does bother me, and I feel like it's not the safest thing, is when you might schedule an inspection, let's just say 3 o'clock, and the inspector shows up at 11 o'clock in the morning. We scheduled it 3 for a reason, because we anticipated being ready by 3. So if an inspector comes in at 11 and everyone is rushing to try to get the ride set up so you don't keep the inspector waiting, I don't like that. I don't like that. We need time. We need to be able to make sure that everything is put together properly. All of the pins, all of the double checking, all of the safety related items that the inspector is coming for in the first place. We need time to get our stuff done. We don't want to be rushed. So I don't like it when the inspector comes hours beforehand and is sitting in his car saying no rush. There is a rush because you're sitting in your car waiting on us. So I like that to happen as least as possible, because we got a lot of stuff to make right, and we want everything to be right for the inspector. It's very important to us. So safety is important, and sometimes safety takes extra time, and we're willing to put the time in. And yes, another thing that's important, we're in the rental business, so we provide rides for a variety of clients. Usually it's a higher end event where the client really is, you know, putting a lot into their event, and they care a lot about presentation and, you know, the way the equipment looks. So you can't do that and allow people to get on your rides with soda, food, popcorn, caramel, chocolate, all kinds of that. You know, it's not good for the ride. The ride would not look good when it showed up, because there's no real way to wash out the inside of these gondolas. They're all fiberglass, and we've got to keep the stuff looking good. So we travel a lot of places. We keep the ride in good condition. We wash it whenever we can, but there's still a lot that goes into it. I mean, we have to make sure that we communicate that to the people riding, is they want a nice looking ride, and we want to provide them with a nice looking ride to send them to their events with. So yeah, appearance is very important to us. We keep these rides looking great. So on this gondola, we had our original Ferris wheel, the Garbrick, the 1969 Garbrick 12-seat Ferris wheel, which is what we started our business around, was this Ferris wheel. It's still operational. We don't use it as much. We use the gondola just because the gondola has enclosed seats, and you can put 4 people in a seat compared to 2. And people are less likely to rock the gondolas than they are the traditional Ferris wheel with the side-by-side seats. So that makes a big difference. But we thought definitely, since everything started around this Ferris wheel, that we absolutely had to have this tied into our new Ferris wheel when we bought this gondola wheel. And glad to have it on here. We also have our carousel on one of the other ones. And all of these murals that are airbrushed on, they were all chosen by us. So the kids, Jessica, myself, everybody had input on these murals that were airbrushed onto the gondolas. So it's a part of our family on here too. So we've got a pin, an area on the Ferris wheel where we try to pin it during transport, and it's for the platform. It kind of holds 2 corners of the platform together and keeps them from wobbling when we're going down the road. But somehow, when we put an R-key clip inside this pin, the movement, there's a little bit of movement, and it pushes the key out. So Jessica decided that we will use this type of retainer. It's a little bit more, you know, appropriate for this application. Kind of spring-loaded, holds itself in, but she's got to get this drilled out so we can get the right pin in there, and hopefully that solves our problem and stops the wobbling while we're going down the road. Got it.
Perfect.
So one of the things we love is we love going to an event where there's face painting, and it's very popular. A lot of kids love to get their faces painted. We also try to keep our gondolas as clean as we can. But something that I have noticed, I don't know why, as soon as a child gets their face painted, they immediately want to come ride the Ferris wheel. And when they get in the wheel, they sit down and they're ready to enjoy the ride. But before they ride, they love to do that. And we got some spots on here. We can't get them off. I don't know what they put in face paint. It comes off their faces, obviously, because it can't last forever. But it sure does love these gondola wheels.
I don't want to scratch the plexiglass, so I don't know. Nothing.
Another thing that the state checks is that you have to have a way of measuring people's height to ride. So you can't have anyone on the ride that's not supposed to ride. And of course you have to have a method of measuring them, whether it just be something as simple as a piece of electrical tape on a piece of fence that shows your height. You have to have a method and a mechanism to measure. The gondola wheel requires 42 inches to ride, period. So that means that even if they're sitting on, sitting with their parents or a responsible rider, they have to be 42 inches. It's a long way up, 50 feet. Someone falls out, a child climbs over to the back. Kids get different when they're up at a different height. They may panic, anything could go wrong. 42 inches is the height to ride. Thing is, what you get is when you get your gate person, sometimes if they hold the stick, you see people doing stuff like this to try to give that child the benefit of the doubt, so they'll tilt the stick. But that's not okay. We can't operate outside those parameters. That's what was set by the state. You have to have guidelines. So to avoid that, I made this stick, and it works pretty good. So you child stands here, and you set the stick down, and it measures their height. So a child this high, this little needle back here would be in the green, and it means they're good to go. If they fall below that, they'll be in the red, and the red means not tall enough to ride. As much as we would love to let everyone ride, safety is where it's at. We've got to keep people safe. So that's what we use, and it's a foolproof method. And I came up with this because I didn't want anyone tilting the stick. I want the stick to be up perfectly right, so we can put this stick up against our fence, and it gives us that measurement. And the person who's checking the height can see very clearly. If they're in the green, they can ride. If they're in the red, they can't. If they're on the line right there, they're good to go. Another thing, to ride alone without a responsible rider, you have to be 50. So that gives us our 50 right up here. So the main criteria is this mark right here. This is the most important mark. So this is what we use, and it works fantastic every time. So this is John here from the Ohio State Department of Agriculture. He's going to be doing the inspection. We also have Adam behind him. These guys are going to inspect this ride, make sure everything is safe. Right now they're taking a look at our manual, so they're familiar with the way the ride is to be inspected, any parameters. It says everything in the manual. And then they're going to go to town and inspect this thing and make sure it's safe for use. So what we're doing right now is a big part of the inspection is maintenance records, paperwork, logs, everything. So the inspectors are reviewing. Some of the parts have been emailed to them so they can review them and keep a record of them. But nearly every state that we go to, it's very important that they get the paperwork. They want to know everything that has happened to this ride, where it's been set up, and that the daily logs are checked. Who's running the ride, make sure the operator is certified to run the ride, that they've had the adequate training, that the ride has had the required items, parameters of inspections, NDTs, all that. So they want to see all that, make sure that we're keeping our records straight, because if you don't have a record of it and you maintained it, it didn't happen. Yeah. So maintaining the ride is only one part. The other is keeping maintenance records. So before they're even going to inspect the ride, they're going to check this stuff and make sure we have everything that we need. And we try to do our best keeping these records, and we'll know soon if the inspectors are happy with our work.